We can now start the meetup. Yeah, I'm Maria Wagner. I'm the managing director and co-founder of the Sustainable Games Alliance, and I'm really, really happy to welcome all of you here. So I quickly want to introduce our speakers today. We have Joanna, a sustainability reporting expert from CD PROJEKT Red. We have Eva from Remedy Entertainment. She is the legal director at Remedy there. Yep. And then we have Ben, who is our standard lead and research lead at the Sustainable Games Alliance. And basically, he will be also the one who will start the session, just basically giving an overview of where does climate risk analysis sit when it comes to sustainable compliance. Yeah, and with that, I will hand over to Ben.
Thanks, Maria. Excuse me. Yeah, good morning or afternoon, I suppose, for most of you in Europe, and good evening from Melbourne, Australia. We're here to talk about climate risk analysis and what that means for the games industry and what that looks like. So I won't take too much time. I really want to get into what Joanna wants to talk about and share with us. But I thought what I might do first is provide a little bit of the context, the sort of background that we are making games in, and that makes this such an important topic. So greenhouse gas emissions are still rising. I think this is a fairly well-known fact. The emissions for 2024, we're sort of expecting some of the details of that to come out in the next couple of weeks. And that's obviously a challenge that produces impacts on the whole world, right? And it leads to increasing costs with more greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. The air is warmer, it holds more moisture, it leads to more floods, heats up the oceans, which leads to changes in other climatic patterns. So this report here from, this is like a US-based insurer, First Street. They just released this report the other week on their assessment of the climate risks facing the insurance industry. And you can see the trajectory that it's on is on an upward grade, with 1,580% increased damages from natural disasters over the last, say, 40 years. And so that trajectory is kind of set to continue unless we bring emissions down in the short to medium term. And research, quite scary research in some ways, has revised the estimated sort of impacts of climate at the high emission scenarios. So some of these models are looking at like really quite devastating economic impacts across all of society, which obviously makes it really hard to do business, makes it really, really hard to make games. Yeah, just a very unstable environment for everything. So to help prevent that and ward off those really high emission scenarios, the EU has, in its last kind of commission period, introduced the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, the CSRD. Now that was initially proposed in 2021, started to be adopted in 2022. The standards that companies have to report under, according to the in the CSRD, were developed in 2023 to 2024. And that meant that the largest companies and anyone affected by the CSRD needed to disclose material topics on impacts, both company impacts on climate change, so that's emissions, that's biodiversity, it's nature impacts, and the impacts that come from climate change, which is the topic of what we're looking at today. What does a changing planet mean for your business? How do you prepare for it? What do you need to be aware of? What are the dynamics that are playing out in the next 10, 20 years? So last financial year, the largest companies that were previously required to report under the NFRD started reporting. So those reports are coming out as we speak. We saw CD PROJEKT Red's come out earlier this year. We're about to see Ubisoft's in a couple of weeks. We've seen a few other big games companies come out. Previously, before about February this year, the next tranche of companies were going to have to start reporting. That was large companies, with 250 employees or more, or 50 million euros turnover, all of a sudden the EU Commission has decided, okay, we'll put a pause on that. We'll give companies a bit more time to comply, and possibly even tinker with the thresholds. So some of that is open to the political process right now. So we can't really say definitively what's going to happen, but possibility is that in 2 years' time, yeah, we'll see those companies have to report. For a bit more detail on that, look at our SGA webinar that we held with EGDF. And within, this is the very last slide, I promise, within the ESRS, so the standards that determine what companies have to report is ESRS E1, climate change, which requires disclosures of material impacts, risks and opportunities, which is where we come to climate risk, physical climate risk, the impacts of heat waves, fires, floods, all of that kind of stuff. So to tell us all about the CD PROJEKT Red approach to this topic, how they've done analysis, what they found out, and where they stand, I'll now hand over to Joanna to give us a presentation.
Thank you, Dan. Hi guys, thanks for having me, and let me share my screen. Yeah. Okay, hope you can see this. So yeah, I would like to show you how we prepare our climate risk analysis. And let me start with just an overview of our sustainability reporting history regarding climate disclosures. So in 2022, we published our first sustainability report with scopes 1 and 2 and taxonomy disclosure for the first time. And we set a goal to identify and assess climate-related risks in line with the TCFD recommendations. And in the following report, we added scope 3 and disclosed the results of those analyses. Last year, we provided a more comprehensive climate disclosure, more detailed description of our process, and finally, our report published this year reflects the mandatory ESRS disclosures because we are in the first wave of that regulation. And I would like to point out here that our current analysis has some limitations. It was conducted for the location of our main operations in Poland, which is our Warsaw campus. And this year, we aim to develop how to approach the financial effects of climate-related risks. And looking for the future, our plan for next year is to expand our risk analysis to cover the value chain. And to visualize what we are talking about here, I refer to this diagram. And looking at it from the bottom, those yellow boxes, what negative impacts can climate change have on our organization? This can manifest, as you can see, in transition risks, which can be policy, legal, technological, market, or reputational, or as a physical risks related to acute weather events or like chronic changes in climate patterns. And these are the issues that really can affect our business, but the thing is that we often just don't have time to think about them in our daily work. And that's why we like to view these reporting requirements just as a motivation to think through these topics and dedicate time to them at least once a year. And looking above, there's another direction. As a company, we also have a negative impact on the climate, and it's our carbon footprint. And the green box at the top, climate change can also potentially bring some opportunities, which we should identify, and I will talk about it a little at the end. So what should we do in terms of reporting requirements? According to ESRS, we need to describe the process, how we identify and assess those material climate-related impacts, risks, and opportunities. And while doing that, we should also consider our own operations and our entire value chain. And we must explain how we used scenario analysis and what time horizon did we choose. It can seem complicated right now, but we divided it into smaller steps, and I will show you those. And the good news here is that the main frameworks and standards regarding climate risks, I mean the TCFD recommendations, taxonomy requirements, and the ESRS are consistent, and the guidelines for how to conduct such analysis and what to disclose are pretty much the same. So yeah, that's good. And now I will walk you step by step through the process of preparing such disclosure. They will be 7 steps. At the beginning, we need to define the scope of our analysis. And while the standard would like us to cover entire value chain, we decided to break this down into smaller steps and initially focus on our main operations, which is the Warsaw campus, where we have CD PROJEKT headquarters and GOG. And in the future, we plan to include the growing North America hub and our value chain here. Next step is adopting time horizons for our analysis. We align the short term with our financial planning, so it's 1 year here. Then the midterm, 2030, because of the Paris Agreement, and 2050 as the climate neutrality horizon. Step 3 is the identification of physical and transition risks. And the TCFD, the taxonomy, and the ESRS provide us tables with those types of risks. And here we can see the physical risks related to temperature, wind, water, and soil, divided into acute and chronic categories. We also have a breakdown of transition risks by category, so the policy and legal ones, and in the area of technology, market, and reputation. And the question here is which of these risks are applicable to us, to our case. When considering physical risks, geographical location is a key. And for that location, we can check climate projections in climate databases. It's an open source, but this can seem complicated, at least at the beginning. So it's often helpful to look for regional or local climate strategies. And a few years back, at least in Poland, but I think it was a broader EU initiative, regions or large cities have developed climate change adaptation strategies, and Warsaw has such a strategy. And it indicates that the main physical risks our campus location can face are heat waves and floods. So from the entire list of the physical risks, we only take heat waves and floods for further analysis. And regarding transition risks, we conducted an internal workshop with a couple of our teams where we discussed the likelihood of occurrence of each risk and potential mitigation strategies. And in this area, with the transition risk, I can say that this knowledge exists, like within the organization, and such internal workshops are enough to identify them. And in step 4, we should select 2 scenarios. One with the rise of temperature below 2 degrees at the end of the century, and this can be the one that leads us to achieve the Paris Agreement 1.5 goal. However, it will be really hard as we already reached that level. And it's the RCP 2.6. And another one above 2 degrees. And this can be a business as usual scenario where climate change progresses much faster, and it's RCP 8.5. Those scenarios are described in the IPCC reports, but we need to think what they mean for us, for our case, for our country. And we have to set a clear definition for them just to catch the differences. So we described the implications of both those scenarios, such as faster or slower implementation of regulations, changes in energy prices, and shifts in consumer awareness. And for transition risks, the location is also important. For example, the current energy mix in Poland with 70% of coal gives us a different scenario compared to other countries with more renewable sources. And once we have this understanding of the risk categories and the implications of each scenario, we move on to assessing the likelihood of occurrence of each risk. And step 5 is the risk assessment itself. So we discussed physical risks one by one. And here you can see that in addition to floods and heat waves, we also have power outages. We decided to add this risk because it's like particularly important for our operations. And blackouts already happens, so we assessed the likelihood of this risk as high. The likelihood of heat waves is also high, as we experience them like every year. And about floods, we assessed them as low. Warsaw had last massive flood about 15 years ago, but overall they're happening like more frequently in Poland. And regarding transition risks, we listed all those that we believe are applicable to our case. And most of them have a low likelihood, but there are also 2 moderate ones. And let's have a look how to assess it, maybe on the example of energy price increases. So we assess the risk as moderate by 25, and then we think how it's going to be in 2030 horizon in the RCP 2.6 scenario. So that's the one when we are tackling climate change. And probably the prices of the energy will be increasing even faster then, especially in Poland. And in the 8.5, business as usual, the increase would probably remain on the moderate level. So that's the equal sign. But in longer time horizon, we agreed that in both scenarios, there will be huge increases in energy price. And our action here was signing a 6-year PPA for energy from renewable sources. First of all, to secure the energy price for a couple of years, but also to reduce our emissions in scope 2. So that's just one example on how to assess it and what the mitigation strategy can be. And the risk associated with reporting obligations is also moderate. With ESRS, it is already happening. And what we can do here is just prepare the disclosures and make them accurate, more like comprehensive year by year. And this is the table that it's a result of our internal workshops, and we update it annually. Step 6 is an adaptation plan, so our response for identified risks. And here I just gather together actions coordinated by different teams, so we can look at it and analyze if we are doing enough or we should add something, we should do something more. And here we focus on adaptation actions in relation to physical risks. So let's take floods as an example. Warsaw's climate strategy highlights that location of our campus is in higher risk of floods. So the question is, how can we continue our business operations when we face a flood? And we brought together our IT and admin teams to list our safeguards. We discussed data center security and building protection, and it turns out our distributed cloud servers located on different continents are also actually flood defense. And of course, it's not like we are doing it because of the flood, but actually it's a smart solution from potential climate risk perspective as well. Plus, we have 2 rainwater collection tanks and a remote work model as a backup. And we think that's enough when it comes to floods. And what's more, implementing such adaptation measures, it's also required if we want to demonstrate the taxonomy alignment for the climate change adaptation objective. So here again, we can see the interconnections of those requirements. And step 7, the last one, After assessing the risks, we should identify the opportunities. So here we consider if there are any opportunities related to climate change. And we can ask ourselves questions related to our operations, like can we improve energy efficiency? Can we reduce the consumption of natural resources, or can we use more renewable energy? But looking more broadly, there are also some truly interesting questions for our business, like how can we produce games that consume less energy, or do the players even expect such solutions? Will there be a demand for them? Yeah, and these are just some examples of the questions we can ask ourselves. And that's the end of my presentation, so thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Joanna, so much. Full of great details there. I'm going to hand over to Eva from Remedy to maybe give us a little bit about, explain a little bit about their context and, have a bit of a discussion with Joanna about how to apply some of those ideas.
Thank you so much, Ben, and thank you, Joanna, for a very interesting and comprehensive and somehow very practical presentation of what this difficult and theoretical subject can look like in practice. A little bit of background on Remedy and our current position. We're in a fairly different status from CD Projekt Red. We were not in the first wave of companies who had to report under the CSRD, so we're still only mapping our future reporting obligations, and particularly since the omnibus was accepted and passed, we're all currently in a bit of a standstill. We don't know what the future obligations will be in practice. So we have started our sustainability mapping internally and have taken that relatively far and have already considered what the future reporting will look like, but we are not yet close to having an actual kind of ready package and output and a report at hand. So in that sense, also personally very interested in what Joanna and everyone here has to say, because it's kind of a glimpse to the future for us. But with that in mind, it was very easy for me to think of a bunch of questions I wanted to ask Joanna so that I could gain some of her expert knowledge or get an insight into some of her expert knowledge. So perhaps I'll jump into the first one.
Yeah, please. Yeah. And if
So
people have questions as well, feel free to put them in the chat, or we'll have time for Q&A at the end as well.
Excellent. So a very basic question to start, and one that I think at least I myself have run into when the CSRD directive first became a topic of conversation at Remedy, that a lot of people were kind of like, okay, but the games industry, are we really an industry where we need to focus on sustainability that much? We're not what's typically considered a kind of burdensome industry on climate. So yeah, for the games industry, with increasing focus on digital sales, not an industry that's considered a top polluter, how would you describe the landscape of climate change or climate considerations, and why it is still relevant for our industry?
Mm-hmm. I think, first of all, that climate change will affect all businesses sooner or later, and it's not like it will affect just the companies from these carbon intensive sectors. And we should also remember that we also have an impact on climate. We use energy quite a lot. So we generate carbon footprint, and we can and we should look for ways to reduce it. And whether we like it or not, the climate risks are just out there. The transition risks, more regulations, increase of the operational costs, the physical risks can affect our buildings, our data centers. So we should think about how we would like to manage those risks. And do we want to mitigate them, or can we somehow prepare for them? Or maybe we just would like simply to accept them. But to make such a decision, we just need to do the exercise and to identify those risks for our particular case, just to know what we are dealing with. Yeah.
That's an excellent question, or excellent answer. Thank you so much. And I absolutely agree. Okay, then maybe moving to the next question. And there was actually, I noticed an excellent comment in the chat saying that AI is likely to drive the carbon footprint of the games industry significantly up. So I think that's a very valid remark as well, and hard to disagree with that one. It would be interesting to see some data and specifics on that in the coming years. Yeah.
Could I maybe jump in with a quick question as well?
Please.
Joanna, could you talk us through a little bit about, because I'm very interested in the sort of engagement process with your internal teams. I think you mentioned sort of workshops. Could you just talk us through a little bit? Like, what did one of those workshops look like? How long did they go for? Who was involved? And what sorts of activities did you end up doing with them?
So with our first workshop a few years back, we just engaged an external consultant to conduct such workshops because we got no knowledge at that time how to do this right. And at first it was a presentation about the climate change. What is the climate scenarios? What is the Paris Agreement? Because it's really important that just to have the participants to be on the same page when we're discussing those impacts. It took about, I think, 3 or 4 hours. But first was the lecture, and after that it was a brainstorm, and we were actually discussing every risk that we think will be applicable to our case. And we assessed then the likelihood and the potential impact. And that's how we picked those most relevant.
Yeah, fascinating. Maybe we could take a couple questions from the chat as well. So we'll start with the first one. I think Gwenele, sorry if I'm pronouncing your name wrong. What is the approach to climate and water impact related to increased use of AI? Has that come up at all for you, Joanna or Eva at Remedy?
I can quickly say from my side that we're not yet at that level of detail, so no for Remedy, but I would love to hear from Joanna.
Yeah, I got the same answer. We are not there yet with the AI and the water impact of it.
Yeah, so just sort of on the horizon, but yeah, maybe part of that future process where you look at the full value chain. That was going to be another thing that I really was keen to know a bit more of. I really appreciated how you talked about the kind of like the local area and the local kind of municipality, the city plan, the EU, you know, encouraging that at different levels. What sort of, how important do you think it is to have sort of local knowledge when it comes to climate risk assessment? Is that going to be an issue when you look at the rest of the world and the other operations elsewhere? Or do you think, yeah, what's the approach?
Yeah, I think it is really important to know your neighborhoods, your like the near surroundings. But I guess it is particularly important, for example, when you are looking for a location of a new office, especially when you are looking for it close to the coasts, because when it will be close to the seaside, there can be some problems with insurance. For example, the insurance can be like really expensive, or sometimes it can be hard to find the insurance company for that kind of office. And yeah, it will just have some additional cost for us. And another thing about those climate adaptation strategies for the cities and regions, the cities sometimes have some projects for the adaptation, some funds even for the companies. So yeah, it just it's good to be in loop in those topics.
Yeah, lots to go on. Maybe we'll take another question from the chat then, from Claudia. Did any results of the risk analysis surprise you? And how long did it take to carry out the whole analysis from the workshops to the end planning?
Mm-hmm. So the first analysis, I think, maybe 3 or 4 months, like from the first workshop to the final disclosure. And what surprised me actually is that we as a company are doing how many things we are already doing. It's not like we did this analysis and it came out, oh, we should do this and that adaptation actions. No, we just gather them, and when we see them together, we were surprised how many of them we are already doing, and we just didn't put them together before. So yeah, that's the surprise. And if there were any risks that actually surprise us, not really, because we were aware that we are close to the river, so the floods risk is out there. The heat waves, we experienced those. So yeah, I think that's the main surprise, and the benefits from those analyses is that we like put together all our previous work and can see the whole picture.
Mm.
I quickly just wanted to jump in because like I think CD Projekt Red is also really forward thinking when it comes to that. So maybe you can also say a little bit more about like your team and how much time you also still like dedicate to this topic, because I think a lot of companies are not at your level there. Yeah.
Okay, so our sustainability teams contains 4 people: our manager, me, my colleague who is a climate expert, and climate specialist. Yeah, so we are 4. But we are just coordinating those sort of things. With the sustainability reports, it's the case that the whole company is working on it, not just the sustainability team. We just like preparing the disclosures. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, it's quite a lengthy report. For anyone who hasn't looked at it yet, I really recommend taking a dive into it, because it is both very long and very comprehensive. So yeah, it doesn't surprise me that it was a real team effort to kind of get it together. Maybe on that topic, do you have any advice for a smaller team or a smaller company that maybe doesn't have those resources of, a 4-person sustainability team? Yeah, what would you do? Would you again do the same thing and try and involve the wider company?
I think that if you have a really small team, like 1 person, it's always good to have a support of some external consultant to like guide you, and like you can brainstorm with him or her, because it's really difficult to do those things alone. And I know that because if previous companies, I had this situation, and yeah, it wasn't perfect. But yeah, you should always think about how to engage the people from other teams, and not afraid to ask for help or if you need anything. And yeah, I think that's my advice.
Yeah, nice. Yeva, did you have more questions you wanted to get out there?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's already been mentioned a couple of times and very clearly throughout this discussion that there's kind of 2 sides to the whole climate change topic when it comes to companies, the climate change effect on the company and vice versa, the company's effect on climate change. So thinking of a more practical aspect on that, I would love to hear, Joanna, how you felt about these 2 dimensions, whether you found one more actionable than the other or one more challenging to kind of grasp or put into focus.
Yeah, we've analyzed our impact in both those directions, and maybe first our impact on the climate, so our carbon footprint. First of all, we did the calculations in scope 1, 2, and 3. And we set a reduction target for scope 1 and 2, and we already implemented some actions there. And that's the easy part. It's all in our hands, in our control. But we have a challenge with scope 3. as you can imagine. And what's more, within our group, we have a digital distribution platform, GOG, and about 65% of our emissions came from that platform. And right now we don't have any clear idea how to reduce those emissions. So that's the biggest challenge, I guess. And the other side, about the risk, the physical and transition risk. First, we analyze them. And we think about some mitigation strategies where the impact is the greatest. And yeah, it is a challenging process. It consumes time and resources. But I would say that it's not as hard as finding solutions for scope 3 reductions.
Excellent answer and very interesting to hear. If I can follow up just briefly, you mentioned that you did think of some or find some ways to reduce your own carbon footprint. So would it be possible to get a few examples of that?
Actually, the biggest reduction is with the PPA for the renewable energy, when we actually reduce our carbon footprint in scope 2, at least market-based. Yeah, that's the biggest one. And apart from that, we also think about some smaller energy efficiency activities, like the cooling system in our data centers and so on.
Excellent, thank you.
Can I ask a question on that? The PPA, which for those who might not be aware of the acronym, stands for Power Purchase Agreement. How complicated was that to set up, and would you recommend that to other companies?
Actually, I wasn't personally involved in the process of the signing of this agreement, but I know that it took a few months, I think more than half a year, with all those negotiations with the procurement team and legal team and administration and environmental team as well. And yeah, it is a complicated process, but when you sign the agreement for a couple of years, you have a secure price, and yeah, you don't have to do another procurement process at that time. So and we reduce emissions. That's the most important here.
Yeah. Should we take some more questions from the chat, do you think? Yeva, what do you reckon?
Absolutely, yeah.
What have we got? Christine was asking whether we considered grid stability in your review. I mean, I think you mentioned that heat wave blackouts, but grid stability might be a slightly separate or side, related issue. Did that come up at all?
Yeah, it did come up, but actually we didn't cover this in our analysis. We just think that Poland should go in the direction to have more renewable sources than it has right now. And when it's go to that direction, it will we will be in the better situation. So I mean, we know that the grid stability is an issue, but the mitigation strategies from our side is similar to the power outages from different reasons, not just the grid stability, and we have just backups for the power generator. So that's it.
Another question from Ossian. I noticed you labeled the risk for your reporting disclosures with greenwashing as a fairly low risk. Whilst I don't want to put into question the efficacy of your work, I'm curious how you make such an assessment, and how do you base your assessments, and are there methods for assessing risks as higher or lower? I think that's a great question. Maybe we could broaden that out even to how you come to those assessments of what is a high level risk versus low.
So actually there are no one methodology of one definition of what does low, moderate, or high means. So we just approached it that way, that about the greenwashing as well, for example. we are just like super careful with every communication. And it was with the PPA, with every communication on our LinkedIn. We just don't make those statements with the green in it. So that's why we just scored it as a low, but of course it is still a risk, and we should be extra careful to keep it on the low level.
I know.
Quick note on that. We actually have another meetup on the topic of avoiding greenwashing on the 19th of June. Yeah, I will post a link later on if you guys want to join. Yep.
Yeah. I was just also going to mention that is Sophie still here? I think she joined earlier. I don't see her in the participants list now, but I know Sophie from MTG is very interested in this question of figuring out what our evidence base is for our assessments of risk and its like materiality and its high or low risk. So yeah, I think that's an area where there's quite a bit of work still to do in the future to kind of bring up those sorts of, or to codify the kind of knowledge that we are bringing to bear in those decisions. Yeah. Another question from the chat, maybe. Do you have any tips for linking sustainability targets to local action, as it can feel a lot less abstract and perhaps easier for people to get behind?
That's a really good question. And so local action. So right now I don't have anything specific in mind. What our actions, what we could link to the local one. But I guess it will be really great if we find such connection. Also because there can be some findings, some like opportunities to collaborate with different companies or the local governments or so on. So yeah, and people will be interested in that. I agree.
Yeah. Oliver, did you want to add something to that?
Oh yeah, thanks very much, and thanks for the work you're doing. Yeah, just an example that I came across recently. So the British travel company Aviva, I know, has put 20 million, actually just over 20 million, into restoring salt marshes. So wetlands habitat, great for biodiversity, but also big carbon sinks as UK-based projects. So very much like a UK company trying to do stuff at a basically local level. And that's quite big in a sense, because 20 million is sizable, but just anything along those lines where kind of the outcomes are more directly tied to things that people can actually see nearby seem to have value. Yeah, and any tips you have for trying to do that would be great, because otherwise it can, like I said, feel very sort of abstract, like some money's going off somewhere to do something and you never really see it. It's actually happening.
Yeah, important challenge.
Yeah, actually, I don't have any tips here because we are not engaged in those kinds of projects yet. But yeah, maybe in the future we should think about it, because I totally agree that people would like to see the effects of such actions.
Yeah, maybe having like a working bee day or something to I don't know, restore part of the CDPR campus. Although I don't know, maybe it's already pretty green by the looks of it. Another question from the chat. Claudia asked, did you work on a climate transition plan as part of the CSRD? And if it's not published out already, yeah, is it kind of in the works?
Yeah, actually, we worked on the climate transition plan, but right now we just cover the scopes 1 and 2 of our emissions. And yeah, we have a description of the process and of the plan itself in our report.
Cool. So yeah, anyone interested in that transition plan process can have a look at the CD PROJEKT Red annual report from earlier this year and check it out. Christine asks, regarding greenwashing, does anyone have views on standardization of green messaging versus the Green Claims Directive? I think, as Maria mentioned, yeah, we're going to have a whole meetup on that in, I think, 2 weeks' time with Nicholas Cascala from the Compensate Foundation, I believe, who is, yeah, like a very known, high-profile figure in the sustainability space and nature restoration and things like that, and also an SGA advisory board member. So I think that'll be a real great opportunity to find out more about that and hear from some of the best.
I mean, we also have actually a recording with another meetup on greenwashing with Rovio, where we went through different examples of like do's and don'ts when you do green communication in the games industry. So yeah, you can check that out as well. And I would love to put another question, like maybe to everyone, because like, how do you see collective action and actually standardization of such approaches within the games industry? Like, do you think this is like useful? Is this something you're thinking about? Joanna, maybe.
First of all, I think that standardize of those topics would be extremely hard. Like we are all in different countries, in different like surroundings. And we are talking about a difficult topic here, really, because the risk management is difficult itself, and it depends on the corporate culture we have. If we are analyzing other types of risk, like production risks, the legal ones, HR, IT, and so on. And actually, our climate risks are analyzing like within the framework of the whole company risk management process. So yeah, I just can't imagine the situation when it will look like the same in every company. And with the standardization, I see a huge value in the standardization, for example, of the calculation of the carbon footprint. So we can compare them company by company. But with this risk management process, I'm not sure.
Yeah, that
it's
sense. Sorry, sorry, Ben. Go.
It's fine. I was just going to make another comment that I think that the local nature of it. This is almost like the dual challenge of climate risk, right? Because in the one sense, we are all on the same planet. All of the risks are being amped up by the release of greenhouse gases, the changes that are happening to the atmosphere, to the oceans, to the weather, the climate, but how those instantiate themselves in our environments and actually interface with the work that we do, where we work, where we live, all those things. Yeah, that's not evenly distributed, is it, all around the world? It's like, very, very particular, in sort of how it's felt, and not evenly, right? This is what we know as well from the science, is that it does impact people in very uneven ways. The last question that I sort of had that is mainly a question again for Joanna, but maybe Eva, you might want to also comment on it too. But my final, the heart, I think, of the question is, what are the benefits of understanding this climate risk? Like, yes, we have the CSRD that's kind of making us do it, but what do we actually get? What do we benefit from? What do we stand to gain by knowing these things? What do we prevent by doing this sort of exercise?
I can gladly give my humble 2 cents and then be happy to hear more from Joanna. Maybe a quick comment also on the previous question before moving on to that one. I think standardization and regulation, and this is a bit of a higher kind of viewpoint on the topic, maybe not going into the nitty-gritty details. I think standardization and regulation is always a two-edged blade, where on the one hand, it's super helpful, for example, from Remedy's perspective, to kind of have a framework to follow and see what other companies have been doing and reporting, even though there are local differences. But on the other hand, it's very hard to kind of strike a balance between balance between not going too detailed and too burdensome and making the bureaucracy kind of only serve itself. And I think that's something that at least at Remedy we're also kind of trying to strike our own balance with, of finding the right way for us to map it and assess it and take those things forward. And I think that also then directly ties in with your next question, Ben, about why we should all do this in practice. I think it's already been stated here, and Joanna said it really well, that this is just a reality already, but increasingly so in the future years. And the earlier you kind of set the mindset of the company and all of its operations so that they also take into account the perspective of climate change or climate impact, I think the easier it will be for everyone involved, for the company, for the employees, for the reporting, for the people responsible for legal compliance in that aspect. So I think it's something inevitable, and that's why hopefully it will also enable the companies to add their own humble impact, or make their own humble impact in a positive way, but particularly just something that we inevitably need to build capacity toward.
Yeah, I totally agree with Eva. And we just, with those types of analysis, those types of processes, when we do this regularly, we just be better prepared for all those risks to come. And for now, it can seem like so far away. But when we think about them, at least once a year because of the regulations, we just be better prepared. Yeah.
Yeah, great. Well, yeah, I think maybe that's a good note to sort of end it on, the preparation for, yeah, I guess unlikely risks, but yeah, nonetheless, very quite real and yeah, important to start engaging with. So yeah, would you please join with me to thank our speakers, Joanna and Eva, and yeah, thanks for coming along and for asking such great questions as well. Thank you.
Thank you for having us, and thank you for the great questions, everyone.
Thanks
and
a
for
lot.
organizing.